Well, it all seems to be about disc brakes on the road bike scene recently. Companies have been pushing the disc brake on road bikes for quite some years now and definitely having success. In the pro peloton and racing, it's also slowly gaining momentum. So it looks like the disc brake is definitely here to stay, and good because there's many advantages to it as well. There are a few other concepts like through axle, which are coming out with disc brakes as well. Some are not, some have still got the quick release, but through axle is another good design. If you're wanting to buy a new road bike, having disc brakes is probably foremost in your mind on your new bike. So there are a number of options. One of the really good options is buying direct from the seller or the company. A lot of companies are doing that now, so you just order online and they send it to you, and it saves you a fair bit of money. Now, one of those companies is called Yoeleo. They've been making carbon fibre wheels for a long time, and recently, in the last couple of years or so, they've branched out into some components and also frames. So with frames comes complete bikes. Amongst the bikes that they can custom make for you comes a road bike, and it's got disc brakes. And not only disc brakes, it's got through axle. And not only through axle, it's got an aero frame to it. So, you know what's in these boxes? Exactly that. It's the Yoeleo R6 disc road bike with through axle. Enough of me yarring, let's get the scissors and open it up. Now with Yoeleo, they usually send the bike in two boxes. One will have the wheels and the other will be the rest of the bike. So we'll look at that in a minute. We'll first have a look at their famous wheels. Yoeleo pack their products very well, even tape down the accessories. Foam blocks, which is a great idea. And then the wheels should just pull out. Right, so there's a protector on one end. There we go, protector on there as well. So very well packaged. Right, so we have some spare spokes and a spacer and some valve extenders in there. So there's our wheels, and without the discs attached, so the discs must be in the other box. Very nice. Tyres of course are flat. And now the rest of the bike. What I'm going to do is open it an untraditional way. Instead of opening up the top and pulling it out, we're going to open the side just to show you how it's packed. So it's fairly well packed. Everything's been wrapped that needs to be wrapped and that's in contact with anything. Oh. Now we've got a packet of bits and pieces here, which will be your through axles, etc. And here's the discs here for the brakes and the bolts no doubt. So, right, so more unpacking. If you ever want to pack your bike up and take it, for instance, on an aeroplane, there'll be plenty of packaging from just a bike like this. So it's handy to keep all this packaging afterwards. Once it's unpackaged, this is what you end up with. Right, so we have a universal sized 1.1/8" fork steerer, a nice chunky and not thin seat post insert, and I chose to go 39-53 tooth front chain rings. Bottle cage mounts, you've got these and the seat tube set as well. Back to the head tube, it's fairly tall for comfort and it's 1.25" on the crown. And accessories that came unattached to the bike, the seat pole plunger, the front and rear through axles, there's some spare bits, probably never use them, and of course then we've got the disc rotors for the wheels and the bolts and the aero seat post and the seat. This is a new Ultegra, the R8000, so it's a medium cage rear derailleur, and seat stays which have a nice looking join on the seat tube. Now before we go and assemble it, just a few words. First of all, the bike does not come with instructions. Well, that's okay because it's 99% finished anyhow for you. All you have to do is put the bits and pieces where they need to go. So that's pretty basic. It also doesn't come with little blocks in the calipers here, little safety blocks, which would have been nice to see. So I'll suggest that to Yoeleo, and they'll probably put that in the future with their bikes for transport, so that'll be nice. It also doesn't come with carbon paste, which you will probably need in the seat post area here and in the carbon bars on the aluminium stem here. So a little bit of carbon paste would have been nice, but anyhow, we should have some carbon paste around the place. Now the other thing to note, with most road bikes you order, they don't come with pedals, and that's the same with this. They can supply pedals for you, it won't cost you much for them to supply them, but usually you have your own pedal system that you might want to go with your shoes, so you have your own pedals. If you haven't, like I have, well, I'm going to have to order some pedals for myself. Right, all that's left now is to put the bike together. First thing we'll do is put the discs on the wheels. So get the discs the right way around, the writing on the outside, TRP and the model number, and just put it straight on, line the holes up. And then the bolts, these bolts have already got thread lock on them, so that's very good. And the fitting is not an Allen key for these ones, it's a T-tool, so this is a T25. So we'll just put them in one by one. Now we've got carbon fibre bars, and they've been pre-roughened here where it joins the stem, so we're just going to put a little bit of carbon paste on here and on the front face plate here. And we just place the bars straight in, make sure the cables aren't impinging anywhere and cables are not twisted in any way. That should be right. Doesn't have to be central at the moment, just near enough. Just pop the faceplate on and hold that. Now these bolts also have a bit of thread lock on them, so no need to grease them. So now put the marking so there's an equal amount on each side of the stem, so the bars are approximately central, doesn't have to be exact yet, and put the bars approximately where you want them, and then just evenly do up the bolts, just so it holds the bars in place. And try and keep an even gap, of course, between the faceplate and the stem on the upper and the lower faces, and left and right sides as well. So don't do them up tight yet, just put them firm so it holds the bars in place. Right, here's our pieces for our seat post clamp, which goes into the frame and pushes against the post. Now that's obviously the adjuster bit, and that's the wedge, and they go in like that. So this concave bit here on this block hits the post there, and the back of the wedge fits in there, and then it drops in the frame. So we're going to put a bit of grease in here because it's metal on metal, so we'll do that first. Now simply drop the piece in the frame like that, and then your seat post should slide in quite nicely like that. So now before you put your seat post in, make sure this is all clean inside your frame in here, and the same with the post, all nice and clean. If it's not nice and clean, give it a clean with some methylated spirits or denatured alcohol, same in there. And then again apply some more carbon paste, just a small smear on the inside there, as far down as your finger goes will do, and then on the post as well. So in that goes. Now I'm just going to set it so it's fairly high. I'll do the height later. So we'll just tighten that a little bit so it holds the seat post in place. That'll do for the time being. Next is, I don't have valve caps or valve lock nuts, stem lock nuts on my wheels. It's up to you, maybe you do, I don't. Now these are deep section carbon rims, and what happens pretty much all the time is the valve, as you go over bumps and that, vibrates and hits the carbon fibre, and you hear rattle, 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 both the front and the rear wheels. So what you do is you get some plumber's tape. So you need to take the tube out and wrap some plumber's tape around where it hits the rim at the top here, and that'll stop the rattling. All done. No rattle. Lovely. Up to the rear wheel, so grab your through axle and the little nut for the other end and put a little bit of grease on the thread. Not a lot, just a little bit. Wherever there's metal on metal, always put a bit of grease. Screw the nut on, just make sure that fits, everything's nice, get a bit of grease on that thread as well. Right, ready to go in. Right, rear wheel. Now it should just slide in quite easily. Everything should line up. Then you put your through axle straight through. And a little nut on the other end. Now for pedals, I took these look pedals off one of my bikes that I don't use much. So we'll put these on. So again, a bit of grease on the thread and in the thread in there and put them on. Now for the front wheel, and of course a little bit more grease on the through axle. Right, now everything's on the bike, it's time to set up some geometry, and the first thing to do is the height of the saddle. So from the height of the saddle there, down to the centre of the bottom bracket spindle, for me is 775. So a direct line. Now it's pretty hard to guess because this frame is a funny shape, so it goes all over the place. So I'm just going to have to guess where I normally measure on the saddle and go down there, 775. Now this is way too high, so I've got to go down. Right, the seat post won't go down any further. My guess is it's hit something in this area. And it's still got to go down. It's still got to go down about 5.5 centimetres. So put my finger where it is, and yep, sure enough, it's hitting this area here. So we're going to have to cut some of the seat post. Right, so I cut off 6 centimetres, and the seat goes down a lot further. And it now measures 760. So I need 775. So all I need now is 1.5 centimetres up. So that leaves plenty in the frame. So that's good. Next measurement from the nose here to the centre of the steerer stem there. Normally it's 445 for me. I'll be changing this anyway, probably lowering it, but it only has to be approximate at the moment. This is 395. So it's a whole, what's that, 5 centimetres? 5 centimetres, so it's got to go back a fair bit. This seat clamp arrangement up here is quite good. It allows for a lot of movement. Not only is there the movement along here, but you can also move the seat rails along the clamp as well, so you get even more movement. So there's two sorts of movements. So you can undo the 2 bolts here, slide it back, which I'm going to do, which it does. Right, so I'll measure that and see if it's right. My next measurement is from the centre of the axle to the top of the bar there, or the stem where it joins here. So I'm 60.5, and that's just over 63. So I'm going to have to come down quite a bit. Right, so that's pretty much smack on. I've got a 5mm spacer under there, so it's almost slammed, but not quite. And that's because this head tube is quite tall compared to my other road bikes, so therefore we've had to go down a bit further. The other bikes have got a bit more of a spacer. I think it's another 5mm. So now it leaves this big bit up here. So rather than go hacking it off straight away because it's ugly, go for a ride. Always go for a ride. So if you're setting up your bike and you need to go lower like this and you end up with this sort of situation, go for a test ride. Even if you're really familiar with bikes, just go for a couple of Ks up and down the road and make sure, just absolutely make sure, because once you've cut it, you can't glue it back on. I'm not telling you anything new, hey. So just telling you, make sure before you go cutting steerer tubes. I've gone for a couple of short rides now on this bike, and I've measured 3 or 4 times and compared to my other road bikes to make sure everything, all the geometry measurements are pretty much identical. And I'm ready to cut the excess steerer tube off. So let's get rid of this ugly bit. One thing you don't want is carbon dust inside your headset bearings, so you can just wrap a rag around your headset as you're cutting it. seal the cut steerer to help prevent moisture getting in. Here I'm just using nail polish. All done. Getting your stem straight with the front wheel is easier said than done too. Here we are, the morning ride. It's wet unfortunately. It's summer in February in Australia. It's summer and it's cloudy and been raining and it's not really cold. All nice and red, about to get dirty from the road. So we'll see how we go. We've got a bit of hill climbing today. Ready to go.
We'll be away next Sunday. We'll see how I go to England and so far so good. I made it to the halfway mark and I don't mind coming second to the Australian champion for over 35s. I don't mind coming second to him. He doesn't really. Everyone else is behind. Heavy breathing. So, yeah. Heavy breathing. So far the bike's been alright. It's misty, it's a bit, looks like it's going to rain up here. But we don't mind, we're tough down here in Australia. It's still raining. What a day to test a bike. Miserable weather. Still going uphill. We've made it to the top of Crow's Nest Road. And it's raining now. Oh, I guess you can't see. Is that better? Everyone's coming now. I better keep on going.
Well, the sort of ride you'd want to test out a bike actually happened this morning by coincidence. The only thing we didn't have was scorching heat. We only did 68 k's, which is quite short for our bunch, and that's because the conditions were a bit adverse. We had mist and fog, then we had rain. We had uphill, we had steep uphill. We had downhill, steep downhill with bumps, steep downhill with bumps and twisty turns. And the wind, we had a fair bit of side wind up the top. It's called Pambula Road, where it's undulating up the top of the range. We had side wind and rain at the same time. So, how did it go? I'm going to start off with the negatives, of which there's two. In fact, there's really only one, because the first one is the bottle cage. As I was riding along, the bottle kept coming sideways, and I was constantly looking down, especially on the rough surface, thinking, is that bottle going to come out? Push it back in. Then, literally 30 seconds later, it was coming out again. It didn't come all the way out, didn't fall on the road all the time, but it was annoyingly so. Not good. And the other thing is, this is a brand new water bottle that I put on this morning, and there's some deep scratches. That's not the cage, it's actually the bolts. So what I needed to do was put some recessed bolts in, and instead I put ordinary bolts on there, and the cage is so low where it dips in here that it scratched the bottle, deep scratches. So I won't be using this cage, so I'll have to replace that, and I'll put two other cages on. So that's that issue, which really isn't the bike, is it? Now the only issue I found that relates to the bike is something that happens with pretty much all bikes. And this is the first ride, so it's this. Loose headset, that's all it is. Now, quite often you'll get that with a brand new bike, you take it out for a ride, and the headset just beds in a little bit. Now we're talking about maybe 2 bees whiskers. That's all it is. But of course when you go over bumps, it's annoying. You don't know what that noise is.
Something loose. Is that where the hell you want to be better than men actually?
I don't know what's loose. and I was thinking maybe it might have been the cable routing, because sometimes your cable rattles on the inside of the frame, and with carbon fibre frames, of course the sound goes everywhere, but it wasn't. I'm pretty sure it's the A headset here being loose. So that's the only negative I could find, and that will happen with pretty much every bike on a first ride, so we can fix it up really easy.
The only other issues I had were these. The rear through axle wouldn't tighten all the way up. The handle just went round and round. And on the other side you can see the nut going around with it. Removing the nut, and you can see the surface on the lug there, and it's smooth. And so is the surface on the nut. So I put some shallow slots in the nut with the hacksaw, and that seemed to help. No problem with the front through axle, as there's a thread in the dropout on the other side. As you can see, 3 of these cables are too long. 2 of them are unfortunately the hydraulic brake lines, a little bit more fuss to shorten, but we'll get it done. While we're on the subject of cables, here's the 2 gear cables. They're nicely tucked under and flush under the bottom bracket area.
Now, because this frame is Di2 compatible and I'm just running mechanical gears, it leaves a little hole here. That's for your Di2. So they supply a little plug which fits in. But unfortunately, it just falls in and falls out really easy. So a little bit of silicone and we'll fix that in there. No chainstay protector. Would have been nice to see at least something on there, even if it was just a bit of plastic. Because we're talking about carbon fibre frames here. As soon as your chain starts flapping up down from vibration, we'll start chipping away at that paint. And carbon fibre frames, no, definitely need a protector on there. With the front derailleur, the outer cage should be about 1 to 2 millimeters away from the top of the teeth on the front chainring. But here, as you can see, it's quite away. So that's going to have to be lowered, the front derailleur.
Seat pole plunger clamp or plug, whatever you want to call it. There's no torque settings as a guide here for this. Very important with carbon products to have a guide for your torque settings.
Front fork dropouts here, a bit of a disappointment in that they're 2 millimeters too narrow. So when you go and put your wheel in, it doesn't fit in. This needs to be pulled out in order for the wheel to drop in. And there's no guide, it's just flat, round. So it really needs to be chiseled out, have a little bit of a guide. So, yep, I'm a bit disappointed in that one too. The paintwork, some of it is just carbon fibre, some of it is the paint, and some of it is the decal. And it's all under a matte clear, so you can't scratch any of the decal off, all the paintwork. And they've done really well because the wheels are the same. It's the same colour logo. Not only that, it's also got a matte finish and you can't scratch the decals off either. So they're like painted on. And they've even matched the seat post, the same sort of decal. So it all looks really good. And now over to the positives. And I was expecting multiple issues to go wrong. Well, at least 1 or 2 anyhow. Have you ever been on the bike, especially a brand new bike, and you're riding along thinking, I bet your bolt's going to come loose. Did I bring that 4mm Allen key? I bet it's going to be the 4mm. Oh, I hope someone in the bunch has got a chain breaker with them. Well, these things are going through my mind all through the ride. Not necessary. It was a total waste of brain power because nothing went wrong. Now, I'm riding a bike which is not a popular name brand and nothing went wrong. So I was not pleasantly surprised. I was pleasantly satisfied. More than satisfied with this bike. First thing I'll mention is comfort. It's definitely a comfortable bike to ride. Now these are 25C tyres, but I also run 25s on my other bikes as well, so it can't be the tyres. The only thing I can think of is the head tube being larger than the other bikes. The other ones are slightly smaller, a bit more aggressive. So maybe it's the head tube, I don't know. Everything else is pretty much the same with the geometry as the other bikes. So comfort, it absorbs the road shock really well. The second thing is fatigue. It doesn't have that fatigue factor. You know how you're riding along and some bikes have just got something about it, it's not comfortable. This, personally, I sat on it and don't think about anything else. No back issue, no wrist issue, no numbness or things going on in your fingers. And I know that's got to do with posture and that, but it just highlights the fact that you don't feel fatigued. And if you don't feel fatigued, especially over a long period of time, then that'll extend your riding pleasure and performance. Now, we did a fair bit of hills this morning, which you're sort of off your seat, on your seat, and a bit of moving around. So that didn't really test out the comfort. If you're spending a long time on the saddle, well, maybe in an 80 to 100k ride or longer, then maybe we'll get more discomfort. But I can tell you now, it certainly feels really, really nice to ride. The second aspect I mentioned is control. It had really good control. Now, I'm comparing this to all the other race bikes, and I'm talking the top of the range race bikes I've ridden in my lifetime as well, and the ones I've got at the moment are still really, really good. This has equal control as them. Now, where control comes critical is downhill. We've got a hill called Nettle Hill Road. It's notorious, all the locals know it. It's steep, it's twisty, it's bumpy, and we did it this morning in the wet conditions. So what you do is you come down Nettle Hill Road and you've got these bumps and you're concentrating on turning the corners tight, and then down the bottom you've got a 90-degree turn, and before that turn you've got to slam on your brakes, then let go and go around the corner. Now, I'm not talking about the disc brakes for handling, I'm talking about the frame geometry and the fork rate. I didn't feel like the bike wanted to go straight or turn in suddenly. It had really nice, gentle and flowing control, really good handling. Now, what more can I say? I mean, I've ridden and still do ride excellent road bikes, and it equals them with control, and I was very surprised at that. Now, just talking about the wheels, the discs on the disc brakes here are 140mm, so it's a smaller one, just a bit smaller. The normal size is 160. My other road bike has got 160 discs, and most of the guys in the bunch with disc brakes, in fact all of them I think, have got 160s as well. Because one of the guys asked me this morning with the new bike, he goes, "Oh, you could swap wheels over and test them out." And I said, "No, you can't, because these are 140s and it won't reach your caliper." So anyway, so that was that. And I was thinking when I was riding this morning, I'm going to lack power. Somehow there's going to be a lack of power, I'm not going to be as grippy. Not at all, just the same power as the other bike I've got. And the control is exactly the same, so no hesitation in recommending 140 discs on a road bike. Now, the Yoeleo wheels, say no more. These wheels are fantastic. If they're anything, they're going to be anything like my other Yoeleo wheels, say no more. They're fine, they're excellent. Another thing I want to mention is stiffness of frame or flexion. Now, you may have done this, and I'm sure you have. I've done it many times over and over. You get a brand new bike or someone else's bike and you want to compare it to your own or something you know in your mind. So what you do, you whack it in a big chainring and you go down the street and you're looking down and you give it a good old mighty oomph for a couple of pedals, and you see if there's any flexion of your chain hitting your outer or the inner plate on your front derailleur. Well, I did that this morning before I met the guys at the bunch meet. And so I got on the bike and gave it a few good little flexes, and you know what? Not only did it not hit the outer or inner cage, I was looking for millimetres of movement, and I couldn't see any. Of course there's movement, but I just couldn't see it. Now, I've also got the Canyon bike, which I compared it to, and that has got a fraction amount of flexion, and that's a very stiff frame. This thing didn't budge, so I can't explain that because it's got a smaller width bottom bracket than the Canyon. So I'm just letting you know that frame stiffness, no problem. It's an extremely stiff frame. Now, whether that's a positive or negative, be great for track racing, I know that. I just thought I'd let you know, no problem with that. And I'm very happy because usually the one thing that's annoying is when someone's pedaling along, especially in big gears, and you hear grrr, 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 or just a little bit when you're riding behind someone and it's hitting on their front derailleur. So anyhow, I just thought I'd mention that, extremely stiff frame. Another thing I'll just quickly go over this side and mention is the seat tube here. Most road bikes, you've got a straight seat tube or near enough to, a slight curve to it. This one's got like an S-bend, it sort of goes like this and comes back steep again. And this angle here, as we've shown before, is steeper than the other road bikes. In fact, it's more like a triathlon frame. Well, did that have any bearing on comfort or performance? Absolutely not. In fact, if I didn't see it and I rode the bike, would have known any difference, and you'll feel the same. So don't worry about that. It's exactly like a road bike. The ride-away weight of the Yoeleo R6 is 8.84 kilograms, and the Canyon Aeroad CFSLX disc rode in at 8.38 kilogram. Last thing I'll say about the bike and overall in general is it's not as racy as a full-on race bike. So comparing it to, say, my Canyon again, and even the Orbea sort of fits halfway between this and the Canyon. This is definitely more comfortable than the Canyon, but it's not as racy. And I would say, again, it's to do with the head tube. So I'm looking forward to doing many, many miles on this bike, and particularly for the longer road rides, if the guys want to do the 80, the 100 Ks, the 120 Ks, I'll be riding this, not the Canyon, because this is more comfortable. Just flat out more comfortable than the Canyon. Don't need to be racy at 100 Ks, not at my age anyhow. Well, that's it for this video, and there's only one more test for this bike, and that's time. And over time you get what? Full of vibration from the road and water. They're the two big enemies of your bike. So we'll see how it goes over time, and I'll let you know. The other thing is too, don't you think these shoes match the bike? I thought so. Red, black, red, black.